therapist, owner operator of The List. I am here today talking with DeLibra, and she is the CEO of her own agency. It's called National Staffing Solutions, and she is here today to talk to us about travel tax, what we need to know so that we don't mess up. DeLibra, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Erica. Thank you for having me.
Please help us to mess this up.
Yes, this is, I will say, one of the things that I've spent many of my years in this industry educating other staffing professionals about. So I'm actually extremely excited to be able to talk to recruiters about what they should be looking out for and how they can protect themselves.
Ooh, okay. So this video could be, I mean, we really do the videos for the travelers, but this could apply to the recruiters too, so that they know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said recruiters. I meant for the travelers. I've spent many years talking to the recruiters about it. I'm excited about talking to the travelers about how they can protect themselves.
Okay, good. Well, we can talk to both. I mean, it's not that the recruiters can't watch these videos and learn something too. They
probably will. And I am, I'm an open book. If anyone ever needs any help, reach out to me. I'll help you answer as many questions as I can. I'm not a tax professional. I always say, make sure you get advice from a tax professional, but I have learned quite a few things about this particular situation in staffing. So travel tax is interesting, that's for sure.
Okay, and how long, so that we know, how long have you been staffing for?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
How long have you been staffing? How long have you been a recruiter?
Okay, sorry. I have been in the staffing industry a little bit over 19 years. I have recruited, I've been on the sales side, I've been in the operations side of the business. That's where I learned the most about travel tax. And I was the COO of the Delta companies and now the CEO of National Recruiting Consultants.
So basically what we're telling you is she knows her stuff, so listen to her. Just so all in, guys. I'm going to. Okay, she has some gems for us. Okay, so first of all, what do we mean by travel tax? What does that mean to you? Can we define that?
Sure. So what I mean by travel tax is this is a little unique industry that we're in, but anytime that you are traveling away from home and duplicating expenses that you would have if you were at home, you're paying those bills at home, but you're also having to pay them away. That is what starts what we call travel tax. So it really is regulations and compliance that the IRS has put together so that you don't have to duplicate expenses by being away from your home to work. So there are certain things that you have to be aware of to be in compliance, but it's actually it's great for our industry because you don't have to pay taxes on that income. And as a staffing agency, we don't either. But because of that, the IRS looks at it very closely to make sure that they're not being gypped. They want all the taxes they can get.
Yeah, if we've got money that we own, they want to get their hands on it. So we better watch ourselves. We better check ourselves before we get audited. So I'm kind of starting at the bottom. We sort of did an outline we wanted to talk about. Can I start with the last question, which is, do I really have a tax home? How do I prove that I have a tax home? Is that a fine place to start?
Yeah, so we have a document that we call things to consider. And so with every assignment, you receive a things to consider, and then you attest whether or not you have a tax home. So on the things to consider page, it's things like, do I have an address where I am paying rent, mortgage, utilities? What address is on my driver's license? Where is my car registered? These are all things that would say you have somewhere else that you really do live. So let's say I live in Dallas, Texas. So my mortgage, my utility bills, all of these things would show you that this is where I live. But I'm going to go on an assignment to Portland, Oregon. So when I'm in Portland, Oregon, I'm going to have many of the same bills: utilities, rent, food, all those expenses. So that's how you know if you have a tax home, if you really are legitimately paying bills somewhere else. I
Mm-hmm.
know in our industry, it's very common for new grads to come out of school and go right into travel, which is great. And I don't deter that, but I do worry. And I've preached many, many, many times to recruiters: be very careful. Don't give someone the advice to just put down your parents' address or put down your grandma's address, and that's not sufficient. And so as an agency, we protect ourselves by giving you the things to consider sheet. So if
Mm-hmm.
the IRS comes to us, we're going to say, well, we told her, here's the sheet, and she still put this
Wait,
down.
if the IRS comes to you, you're throwing us under the bus? You're like,
Well, I
no.
mean, the IRS would come to us and say, this person's not compliant. We would say, but we didn't know that. We gave her the sheet.
Oh
She said
God.
she was.
Okay, that was a
So I'm
question I
just,
had later, but that was not the answer I expected. So,
it's not to necessarily throw you under the bus. It's just to say that we didn't, we would say, this is what we use to say, to show, to do our due diligence to prove that this person has a tax home. So then the IRS may come to you and say, hey, we got this document from your agency that says this is your tax home. Show me your lease. Show
okay,
me.
so pause here. Things to consider, all travelers. PSA, you are the one responsible to make sure that you are compliant. So your agency can give you suggestions
Yes.
and your tax professional can give you suggestions, but it's up to you to make sure that you are compliant. So if they are giving you that information and you're just saying, oh yeah, I have a tax home, oh yeah, it's fine, and you're not actually compliant, it's on you 100%. So
So
PSA,
yeah, because
make sure we're doing that right.
yeah, make sure you're doing it right. So what I would advise a new grad or someone who doesn't necessarily own their home or have a lease, or let's say you're putting down your parents' address
Mm-hmm.
and you live with your parents mainly, right? Like when you're in college, you probably have a room at your parents' house. You need to make sure that you're paying your parents um, fair market rent for that room. So if they were to put this room on Airbnb or something, what would they get for that room? And then as long as you're paying that to your parents, that's your tax home.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're, or your parent, I mean, whomever, but if you're not really duplicating expenses, your pay package needs to be taxable. You can't take tax-free money. You have to be duplicating.
So when I go speak at schools, I get this question from new grads all the time that are interested in travels, like, how do I do this? And the rule of thumb that I give them, again, I am also not a tax professional, but this is cumulative from my years in the field and talking with experts in the field on this. I say, you have to prove and know that you live in this certain location and you are being displaced from this location to go and work in the field. Your job is that you have to be somewhere else, but you are still maintaining this home. So you have relationships in that community. You're paying fair market value for the place that you're living. When you're home, I don't know if you have pets or groceries or whatever, you don't just pay rent. You're involved in the community. Your driver's license is there.
Your
Your
driver's
cars are
license, your car.
registered there.
Mm-hmm.
This is your home and you treat it like your home, and you go home at minimum 30 days out of the year. And that's a rough rule. It's not written anywhere how many days it is, but the rule of thumb is 30 days a year or 60 days in 2 years if you can't get back for some reason. And that information is coming from Travel Tax Joe, who we can link you to. So you just want to represent that you really live here and you have to go work somewhere else. So
Yes, that's
there's
excellent advice.
yeah, there's different ways to do that. Most people, or a lot of new grads, will just use their parents. A way to find fair market value for a room in a home is to go on, like, say, Craigslist or something, and find the average of what people are paying for rooms in a home in your zip code, and average 3 of them and document it. Have a screenshot, show that you actually went and got this information, and it's $550 a month is average for a room rental here, and that's what I'm paying. So you can either pay for a room rental in somebody else's home, or you can split the cost of a home with someone else. And that's what I do. I have a friend in Florida that I used to pay a third of the home, and someone moved out. And so now I pay half of the home, all of the bills. I pay half of electricity, water, the mortgage, and it's in Cape Coral, Florida. So it's a pretty affordable home, but I pay half of all of the bills no matter what every month. And that is how I confirm not only am I paying those, but I go back there, I keep my things there. Nobody else stays in my room. That is my tax home, and I treat it as my home. So that's what I do, and that's one way to do it.
That's perfect. That is the key. And I worry and I'm concerned at times that people aren't that diligent about it, but that's what it really takes just to stay compliant so that you don't end up in a nasty little IRS audit.
I have to tell you, I thought everyone was as scared as I was, but I have met so many people on the road that don't know what a tax home is. Like, they are collecting tax-free stipends and they've never heard of a tax home. They don't know anything about it, or they'll stay somewhere for 2-3 years. And if you're staying at if you're staying at an assignment for more than a year, the government can say, okay, you've pretty much moved here at this time. You've pretty much abandoned your home, and you now live in this new city and work here permanently. No matter if you're on a travel contract or not, they're going to say, okay, there's a threshold where you've just given up your home and you now live here. So I am shocked by how many people are not scared of that. And they're just like, well, I'll take my chances. Like, I don't know. I'm like, do you know how much you're going to be audited for?
The people that are, I'm going to take my chances. Here's the thing is that right now, the IRS is, they are aware of our industry, and they are aware that there is some abuse. So they've started this, there are things that kind of, I guess, tip them off at times, and they'll decide, okay, this person, we're going to send them a letter and tell them we want to have an interview. And they'll just interview you. And it's not necessarily that you're going to be audited, but if in that interview they sense that things aren't together, then you will be. And they typically also come after your agency too. So agencies have been, there's about, I think the last time I talked to Joe about it, he said there were like 12 agencies going under audit. And so if they are being audited, they're looking into all those files and figuring out who's not compliant. And I would have a hard time believing that they're not going to come and look at those travelers too. But how they are tipped off is they're sending the letters to the individuals saying, hey, we want to talk to you about your taxes. You call in, answer a few questions. Next thing you know, you may be audited. And so they are very aware of our industry, and that we kind of, we've kind of flown under the radar for a while, and that's what's caused it to be so loose. And so I would be nervous.
There's been a lot.
Don't stay somewhere more than a year. There's
been a lot going on with this in the background that probably most travelers aren't super aware of, that we don't have to go into on this video, but for sure they're looking at, how much are we being paid hourly? What's the overtime looking like? And their eyes are on it. So you need to be just checking the boxes. And it's not that hard. I mean, once you have it set up, it requires some thought and some planning, but you need to do it, or you might.
Just don't check a box to check a box. Make sure you really have done what you need to do to protect yourself.
Yeah, and record it somewhere. Put it in Google Docs. I have a spreadsheet in Google Docs. Oh my gosh, everyone's going to think I'm such a nerd. Okay, well, I have a spreadsheet in Google Docs where I put, the water bill this month, the electric bill, and the mortgage payment, and like how much I paid and the date I paid it, so that I have that record. One, for me, because I'll be gone for 9 months, and I'm like, dude, did I ever pay Tom? Like, I have no idea. So one, it's for me to know that I paid those things. And two, it's to prove like, this is what I'm doing. I'm above board. And I just keep all of that in a file. So make fun of me if you want, but I feel kind of safe.
So. Okay, you'll be safe.
Okay. All right.
So, I mean, I think that if they interviewed you, you'd be fine.
Cool.
You
Cool.
sound like you have it together. That's really good.
Good. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. So there's a couple other things you want to touch on. Do you want to touch on the 50-mile rule? I know it gets you real riled
Yeah.
up, and it's funny to me.
That one is like the biggest I don't know if I want to say misconception, but the biggest it does not apply to our industry. I'll explain. There are state senators, right? That each state has senators. So when they travel away from their home, as long as they're 50 miles away from their home, the tax-free money starts for them. So if I'm I'm from the state of Texas, so it's easy for me to use Texas. So let's say I'm from Dallas, but the state capital is Austin. And so I have to go to Austin for work. And when I go to Austin for work, I'm more than 50 miles away from my home. So for that reason, I'm able to then tap into tax-free per diems. It was never intended for our industry, but we have used that for years as like, okay, I got you to be 50 miles away from your house. The real standard is whether or not it's feasible for you to make the drive home every night.
Yes.
So
yes.
if you are really, there are some places that 50 miles is not that big of a deal. You could drive home every night. And if it's feasible, you're probably doing that, and you can't have tax-free money.
Mind you, think about this, guys. In home health, we drive 50 miles to see patients all the time. So for us to drive 50 miles to see a patient and back and be like, oh, but we couldn't do that to get home, like they're gonna be like, really? Because we also do your logs, like we have your mileage logs, you know what I mean? Those are recorded. So
what I've taught my staff to do is to Google map it and look more at the time. If it takes about an hour, that person's probably driving home. If it's taking 2 or 3 hours, they're probably not going to drive home every night. They're probably going to drive home on the weekends, but not during the week. So you give them per diems for the weekdays and then not the weekends. But there are, so you're supposed to be that diligent about it. You're not supposed to take the 7 days if you're going home on the weekends.
Well, I didn't know that.
Now, if you're taking if you rented a place, you're still duplicating that expense. So then it's fine. But let's say you're staying in a hotel during the week and checking out on the weekends. If you're audited, you're not going to have receipts for that additional time. You're going home. So you're going to owe taxes and penalties on that time.
Okay, that's good to know. Also, any travelers that can go somewhere for 5 days, work, and then go home for the weekend and take all of your stuff with you, I admire you and I want to be you, because I can't do that. Oh my gosh, moving stuff is the most annoying. I'm just, wherever I am, I'm just there. So,
but if you're that close to home, you're probably not taking anything but clothes, really.
Yeah, you could just run with a suitcase. I've never even thought about it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, but there are some areas, right? Like in LA County, that 50 miles is unbelievable. That could be 3 hours. Mm-hmm. So then you don't want to make that. I mean, most people don't. So then in that case, you're entitled to it because it does make sense. You're not driving home. I had a home health traveler whose home was up in a mountain in the hills in North Carolina, but her home health route was the valley down below the mountains. Mm-hmm. And so it was less than 50 miles, but it was winter and icy. So she duplicated expenses. She couldn't get home. So she was in that valley. So the 50 miles, so that was less than 50 miles. Mm-hmm. So that is not, I know a lot of agencies use it as a measuring stick, but just think about if it's feasible for you to go home every night, then you're not, or if you are going home every night, you should not be getting tax-free money because you only have one domain. You're living in one place.
Right. Okay. So you've heard it here and you've heard it probably from 100 other places, I hope. The 50-mile rule is not a thing. It doesn't apply to us. And any tax professional that you talk to will tell you that. They will say, I'm trying to get rid of this 50-mile rule myth, because that's not it. It's, can you go home or can you not go home in a reasonable amount of time? And that's what
it is. That's it.
Duplicating expenses and you're not going home. So that's it. Another point that you wanted to bring up was about relying on your recruiters for information. Do you want to talk about what
Oh, great.
Talking about?
So one of the things that the recruiters, what we use as a tool, and I just want to make sure everyone out there is aware of it and you check it yourselves. We call it the GSA. It's the GSA.gov, but it's the General Services Administration. And that is the agency that dictates the allowances, the tax-free allowances. So for your meals and incidentals and your housing allowances. So it's in this website by zip code, and it'll tell you on the chart. Some of them are seasonal. So like in Alaska, the rates are different in the winter than they are during the summer.
I did not know that.
Sometimes agencies sometimes don't keep up with it. So you could need more than one contract per assignment if the rates change mid-contract.
Whoa.
So you should look at that site to make sure you stay within the guidelines for what you're allowed to have in that particular zip code. And it's going to go by your work location. So if your recruiter is like, okay, we're going to give you $150, we're going to do this and this, and you're not really sure where those numbers came from, I would go on to the GSA site and just double check that you're okay within that time frame and in that location for those amounts. Because if for some reason you're overpaid, then it's subjected to audit. You would owe taxes on that money and penalties.
So I 100%, if my recruiter says this is what it is, like, and I've been doing this for 5 years and I'm pretty involved in the industry. And if my recruiter says it, like, I am very aware of the GSA website, but if my recruiter says it, I'm like, that's fine. Like, I don't check it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a couple of minutes. Before I'd sign, I just double check, make sure you're good. Okay. Just because where I've seen things get tricked up, and those are honest mistakes, it's like that season change, and the rates may change based on the season.
Okay.
So you have to just know that, just keep a lookout for yourself on that. And the thing is, and a lot of them, I mean, the rates are really high in a lot of places, like in San Francisco, and your agency is probably not going to ever get you to that rate anyway, because they'd have to not pay you anything in taxable income, which would be a really bad detrimental situation if the IRS saw a huge dip in what your taxable income is. So there's you have to kind of balance it, but it's worth keeping an eye out for yourself though, for sure.
So let's touch on this for anybody that doesn't know what the GSA rates are. What that is it's a government set amount allowance that your company is allowed to pay you in tax-free stipends for meals and for lodging. And that's the maximum amount that your company can give you tax-free. So they cannot give you more than that amount. They can give you less than that amount, and they will give you less than that amount dependent on how much the facility is going to pay you. So you're not always going to get that amount. I think that's another myth that travelers think, oh, if I go here, I get this much, but somebody has to pay the bill. And if they can't afford it, they're not going to pay all of that. So that's the maximum threshold that they can give you tax-free. Everything else that you're going to get paid has to go into your taxable hourly rate. So that's what the GSA rate is, just to be clear for anybody that wasn't.
So yeah, I would say, just to keep yourself in the clear, just double check that to make sure your numbers are underneath their rates. I would make sure that I don't stay in a assignment more than a year. You got to leave and go somewhere else. The IRS says 30 days isn't enough. Staying away for a year is too long. There's not an exact amount, but the industry advice is at least to go away for one assignment. So if you go away for 3 months and then come back and start again, which works out pretty well for schools, which is what we staff. You're away for the summer and then you can come back in that fall. So you have to make sure that you're not staying in the same location more than a year. And then the other thing you just want to be mindful of, I guess maybe there's 4. The other thing is make sure you're duplicating expenses. And if someone tells you just as long as you're 50 miles away, do not believe that. Just make sure that it's not about the 50-mile rule. It is a rule. It just doesn't apply to our industry. So be mindful of those things.
Okay.
You'll be all right.
Yeah, you'll be all right. You said something something I said earlier was you need to be there at least 30 days a year or 60 days in 2 years. And that comes directly from Travel Tax Joe. He does a lot of our taxes. He does my taxes personally. He tends to be sort of the guy for this in the industry. Are you suggesting that maybe 30 days isn't long enough in a year? Because there's no
turn around and go back to the same place. You said 30 days home. That is what Joe says.
Yes.
But if I'm going back to the same location, that's not enough time.
Right. That's another thing. Actually, per Joe, you can't go back to the same location, because if you go home and then you go back to the same place without going somewhere else first, they're going to say, okay, well, you pretty much just moved there and you're trying to check boxes there, and then they're going to see it as you've moved there, or they could.
You've moved there.
So the advice is, once you've been at a location, you can't go back and come back to that location. You have to work in a different zip code. Right. It can't even be a different company in that zip code. It needs to be far enough to where you couldn't be staying in the same place again, because.
And I've seen that. I've seen travelers just hop agencies because they love the facility and they want to stay on at that assignment, and they just go get another agency and try to stay for another year. And that is a terrible practice. I don't advise it. And I try to train recruiters to make sure you're looking out that their resume they're basically staying in the same town or the same area. You have to go away. Go do an assignment far away somewhere else, and then come back if you really love it. Or you really have to just move there.
Or just move there and stop collecting the tax receipts, and then you don't have to pay either. So.
Yeah.
Very good.
And that happens too. People end up falling in love with someone or the area, and they stay, and that's fine, but you just can't take tax-free money when it happens.
Mm-hmm. So what happens if we do get audited, or if we do get requested for more information? What's the threat here? What are we looking at if we do kind of fudge the rules and we get caught doing it?
So the issue with that is, if they deem that you've made a mistake and you're not compliant, even if it was not every assignment, maybe it was one assignment where you fudge things and you can't prove what you did, they will go back and say, okay, everything that you've done in the past 5 years is all taxable. And then they're going to put penalties on top of it. So you'll then owe back taxes on a lot of money, and you'll also owe penalties and fees. And I don't know how much those fees are, but I know they're exorbitant. And you just don't want to put yourself in that kind of debt.
We can't afford to. We just paid for grad school, and it was free.
I know.
We're paying off for the next 25 years.
We're traveling to pay off the student loans, so we can't go and owe a big tax bill.
When does it end? Okay, this isn't to scare anyone. We don't want to scare you. We just want to make sure you're following the rules. And if you can show that you're following the rules and doing the due diligence to follow the rules, then you're going to be fine. They're not going to go after people that really tried hard, and maybe there's a little discrepancy or something. Like, if you're showing I've done everything I can do to be compliant with this, and you're really upfront and you have records, then you should be fine. So
you'll be fine. It's when you're not, you're just taking the money and not really worrying about it. And I know there are some people out there, and I hope we reach some of them today. But if you, and again, we're not tax professionals. I suggest that you strongly talk to one. If you're in the travel realm, a professional should be doing your taxes for sure, just to make sure that you're covered and you're doing the things that you need to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. And then that way, if you are audited, you have a backup, just like we were talking about earlier about having the insurance backing of your agency. You want to have a tax professional where if you are audited, you have someone that's a professional and knows what's going on and prepared your taxes for you, where you can say, hey, this is what they're looking at. How do I fix this situation? So you're not alone. I mean, it costs like $300 a year. I mean, this is our business. This is our career. This is an operating expense. It's like having someone do your taxes. I mean, that's just my thought. You can do what you want. But
Yeah. I think that's a good rule of thumb. I mean, it's worth the $300.
I know it's nothing crazy. The last question that I had for you, just because I'm curious. So if we are the ones that are responsible, we as travelers are the ones that are responsible, and we do get audited and we are found to be not in compliance, is there any fallback on the agency if that happens to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably need to look at like there's a co-relationship here. If the agency is making mistakes, I'd be mindful of the agency I work for. If they're being just frivolous about this, that'll put you in harm's way. But if an agency is making mistakes, they're going to be in trouble. And then likely the files that are being audited, they may take a look into your tax filings as well. When you have your interviews with the IRS, they're going to ask you, questions about the agency because we're going to be on your W-2. And so when you're saying, yeah, they told me to put my grandmother's address down, they said it would be fine or whatever, then absolutely, the IRS, their next call will be that agency. It's a partnership. We're in it together. I am telling you though, as far as the agency is concerned, like, for a traveler, that's why I wanted to talk about this, so you know the things that you should do to protect yourself, because the agency also has to do certain things to protect themselves. So you don't want to find yourself in a situation where the agency has done everything that they were supposed to do. Like I said, the things to consider form and having you sign off on what your tax home is. And they've kind of covered themselves and you just wrote something down frivolously. And then you're in trouble. The agency's not going to be in trouble. And so you got to just make sure, and vice versa. If the agency is giving you bad advice and telling you to put things down that they shouldn't be and not really following the GSA per diem numbers, and you are, that keeps you clear. You have to worry about, I think most agencies, we do a really good job of trying to protect each other. But there are some people that either miss things, aren't that knowledgeable. Maybe their company doesn't spend a lot of time educating them on this stuff. But it's super important because the risk is really high. And unfortunately in our industry right now, we're kind of that the hot spot. Like the IRS knows that we need to get some money in.
I know. Yeah,
where to go.
Great resource. There is definitely money in our industry, so it would be a great resource to tap. Like, let's get all these.
Tap into
Who can we catch?
So I just want to make sure everybody is doing what they can to be safe, whether you're an agency or a traveler, because this is a great industry, and I don't want to see anything happen to it. And I think it's fabulous that we can afford to pay people this kind of money to go out and help and provide access to care to people that normally wouldn't have it, because there's a shortage of you guys. So
right.
You have to keep it going.
So, perfect. Well, DeLibra, thank you again so much for your time and your expertise on this. We appreciate it immensely. And as always, you're a wealth of knowledge, and we are so glad to have you to educate us.
Anytime. I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye, guys. And also, again, if you want DeLibra, she's the CEO of her agency. She was so great working with other agencies that she was able to start her own agency, and she will be a recruiter for you. Like, when do you get the CEO of the agency to be your personal recruiter? Like, very rarely. I've seen it one other time. So if you want DeLibra to be your personal recruiter, her link will be in the description of this video. You can click on that link. It'll take you to the list website. And as long as you're logged in, you automatically, her phone number and her email will just pop up, and all of her jobs, all of her direct to facility jobs will be listed right there. So you can just contact her directly through that link. You don't need to go through me or an 800 number or anything. Like, her information is sitting right there on the website. So if you want to work with her, definitely click on that. We'll get you guys some other resources. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, put it in the comments below. And if this was helpful for you, please hit like and hearts so that we know that we're on target with things and information that is helpful for you. So thank you for watching. DeLibra, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great. I love it.
And we'll see you guys